Welcome, traveler. Tonight we begin with the physically demanding and often disgusting job of being a medieval butcher. It involved handling raw meat, dealing with potentially unsanitary conditions, and facing potential legal repercussions for poor quality or mislabeled products. While we think that the job was as simple as slicing chicken at home, the truth is being a medieval butcher seriously sucked. Because let me tell you, the smell of dead pigs was the best part of the job. So before we begin, please consider subscribing to the channel, but only if you love the video, and in the comments let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Whether you're relaxing at home in Sydney, preparing for sleep in Manchester, or just driving somewhere in Austin, I'm grateful that you're here. Get comfortable and let's begin. You wake up as a medieval butcher. Congratulations, you're about to spend your entire life ankle-deep in blood, gut juice, and existential dread, all for the reward of being hated by everyone and still not being able to afford shoes. Your shop is a joke. It's not a shop the way modern people think. It's a damp wooden shack, nailed to the side of a building, somewhere between the tanner's yard and the open sewer that people pretend is a road. There's no sign, no ventilation, and no customers who actually want to be there. They come out of necessity, not preference. Everyone looks away when they walk past. You're not just a tradesman. You're the reason God invented incense. Let's talk tools. You've got one cleaver. That's it. No fancy knife set. No sharpening station. Just the one cleaver your grandfather used to kill rats in the cellar. It's chipped. It's rusting. And it doubles as your bread knife at home. You might have a hook or two nailed into the beam above your head for hanging carcasses, until the rope breaks and you get clocked in the face with half a goat. You don't even bother cursing anymore. You just spit out the blood and keep chopping. The work itself, a rotating nightmare. Pigs, chickens, sheep, all still twitching while you try to look like you know what you're doing. Nothing ever dies cleanly. Half the time the customers are watching. The other half, it's dogs and rats. And once, a bishop's cat that refused to leave and stole half a rabbit when you turned your back. You're expected to know anatomy, but no one ever taught you anything. You learn to cut by trial and error, mostly error. Sanitation, please. You clean your workbench with a rag you also use as a hand towel. The floor is covered in straw that hasn't been changed since Easter. Blood pools in the corners and congeals into something that crunches when you step on it. You wash your hands in a bucket that doubles as your mop water. The local doctor blames you for every illness in town, and honestly, he's not wrong. The best part? Nobody likes you. Not the church, not the town council, not even other butchers. You're seen as spiritually dirty, a necessary evil who lives in filth and profits off death. You're not allowed to serve on juries. Some towns won't let your children marry into clean families, and don't even think about going near the altar. You're standing outside during Mass with the lepers and the dog that only has one ear. But sure, you've got job security. There's always more livestock, more blood, more neighbors whispering about how you smell. You'll never be rich, never be respected, and your back will give out before you turn 40. Welcome to the butcher's life. It's loud, painful, disgusting, and you're just getting started. It was supposed to be simple. One swing of the axe, one clean cut, one dead cow. That's how you pictured it when the bailiff dropped off the animal that morning, said best meat in the Shire, and walked off like you were going to serve up prime rib in an hour. But cows are stubborn, heavy, and very much alive, and this one had absolutely no intention of cooperating with your plans. First issue, getting it into the stall. There's no loading ramp, no team of assistants, no soothing music to calm the beast. Just you, your apprentice, who's somehow weaker than wet linen, and a rope that's older than the church roof. The cow doesn't want to walk. It wants to stand there, chewing, staring at you like it knows you haven't had breakfast and your knee's been giving out since last fall. Eventually, after much pulling, shouting, and slipping in something brown and suspicious, you get it halfway through the door. Only halfway. Then comes the kill. You aim for the neck, because that's what you've always done. The axe bounces. Not like a clean chop, more like hitting a tree root with a kitchen knife. The cow lurches, snorts, kicks over a bucket, and pins your apprentice to the wall with a look of absolute loathing. Second swing, worse. Third swing, missed entirely. At this point, you're sweating so much your apron's developing new smells. The cow finally goes down after several minutes of violence, so awkward, even the rats seem uncomfortable. You stand there, covered in blood that isn't entirely the cow's, and wonder for the 100th time why you didn't become a monk. Monks don't fight cows. They copy books. They drink beer. No cow has ever headbutted a scribe into a meat hook, but you don't get time to dwell. Now it's time to skin, gut, and butcher the beast before it starts to bloat in the heat. Skinning a cow with a dull knife is like peeling a boot with a spoon. You slip twice, cut your hand once, and by the time the hide is off, your apprentice has thrown up behind the firewood pile. Classic. And here comes the town inspector, right on time. He's here to make sure the meat isn't diseased, not because he cares about public health, but because he wants a bribe. He pokes the carcass once, nods vaguely, and helps himself to a slab of liver. For testing, he says. You don't argue. You just add it to your list of reasons to drink later. The cow that wouldn't die is now the meat that won't sell. Half the cuts are uneven. The blood didn't drain properly, and someone's already complained that the ribs look funny. You smile. You nod. You hand over the wrapped bones with hands still stained red. It's all fine. It's all normal. It's all just another day in the glamorous life of a medieval butcher. The sign doesn't say that, of course. It just says help wanted, but it might as well read, seeking unfortunate soul with low expectations and high tolerance for trauma. Because being a butcher's apprentice isn't a job, it's a punishment the gods invented when they got bored smiting heretics. Usually it's a boy, around 12, sometimes younger, sometimes older, if he's already failed at every other trade and has strong enough arms to hold down a goose without crying. His parents drop him off with the usual lie. He's eager to learn. What they mean is, please take him before he burns down our house. You nod, shake the kid's hand, and tell him to wash up. He won't. He'll just look around at the blood-streaked walls and realize too late that weaving baskets wasn't such a bad gig after all. The first week is a disaster. He faints twice, once during a beheading and once just from the smell of boiling intestines. He cries when he cuts himself on the cleaver, and instead of cleaning it, wraps it with whatever cloth is closest, usually his apron, sometimes yours. By the third day, he's trying to feed the bones to a cat that absolutely does not work here and probably never left. You're too tired to stop him. Training is generous, if you count yelling as education. Not that way. Don't stab the lungs. Hold the knife like it's not a turnip. You explain how to hang a carcass, how to strip fat, how to not slice off his own fingers, and he nods like he's listening before immediately doing the opposite. He guts a chicken with all the grace of a blacksmith doing embroidery. You consider hiring the blacksmith instead. Still, you need him. You need someone to haul buckets, sweep guts, chase off dogs, and take blame when the lamb goes missing. He's not good at anything yet, but he's there. That's more than you can say for the last apprentice, who quit after a goat head fell on his foot and his mother declared your stall a place of ungodly filth. She wasn't wrong. You still remember the scream. Both of them, some apprentices, stick around. They learn to keep their mouth shut, their head low, and their hands steady. They stop flinching. They start cursing creatively. They learn the rhythm of the cleaver and the difference between spoiled meat and just chewy. And slowly, horribly, they become you. Stooped, grim, hands calloused beyond recognition, a child-shaped husk wrapped in a blood-stained apron, waiting for the day they get to wear the real one. You don't tell them that. You just hand them another bucket and point to the sheep tied up in the back, bleeding like it knows what's coming. Go clean it, you say. He sighs. You sigh, and the day lurches on like an ox with a limp, messy, loud, and always one step from disaster. If you've ever wondered what it's like to spend your day elbow deep in warm, slippery horror, welcome to awful duty, the part of butchery that makes blood look charming. Forget steaks, forget ribs, forget those neat little cuts people dream about when they think meat. No, you're in the medieval trenches now, scraping kidneys, scooping lungs, and arguing with a priest over whether intestines count as sin adjacent. Awful, for the blissfully unaware, means all the stuff most people pretend meat doesn't include: guts, hearts, livers, spleens, and whatever that squishy gray sack was you just stepped on. It's soft, it's unpredictable, and it doesn't behave. You can slice a leg with a clean chop, but offal requires patience. You don't cut it, you wrestle it, and most of the time, it wins. The smell hits first, a wave of warm, meaty dampness tinged with bile, copper, and something that smells like regret. You get used to it eventually, but not really. You just get better at pretending. It soaks into your clothes, your skin, and somehow your soul. You've tried herbs, vinegar, rubbing yourself with mint. Nothing works. You are now 30% liver by osmosis. There's no offed bin, no neat containers. You pile the organs into buckets and baskets and hope none of them leak. They always leak. Once your apprentice tripped and dropped a full sack of tripe into the firewood. The smell took 3 days to leave, and the woodcutter's wife has refused to speak to you since. Honestly, can't blame her. Some people love offal, but not the ones who clean it. Nobles will order goose liver pâté and act like they're cultured. Peasants will boil pig intestines and call it stew. But in between all that, you're the one scraping feces from a colon that's still twitching. You try not to think about it. You fail. Offal is also highly perishable. You can't leave it hanging around unless you want to start a new plague. You've got a narrow window: slice, rinse, maybe salt it, and get it sold before it changes color or starts making noise. It's a race against nature, and nature cheats. And when you finally do sell it, a few pence maybe, maybe not, someone will haggle you down, tell you their grandmother got better kidneys last week, or accuse you of selling goat heart disguised as cow. You don't argue anymore. You just nod, pocket the coin, and wipe your hands on a rag that smells worse than the meat. It's not pride, it's survival, and your next bucket's already full. It started with one bad knot. That's it. Just a slightly loose hitch in the rope, tied by your apprentice, who apparently thinks pigs tie themselves up out of politeness. The pig in question, a 200-pound meat missile with the brain of a toddler and the soul of a warhorse. You turned your back for 1 second, just one, and that was enough. The squeal echoed like a battle cry. You looked up to see a blur of pink and panic charge past your stall, overturning a barrel, knocking over a child, and sending 2 goats running like they'd just seen the devil. Congratulations! You're now responsible for a full-speed pig rampage in the middle of town square. People screamed. A merchant dropped his apples. Someone's grandmother fainted. You took off after it, apron flapping, cleaver still in hand, looking less like a butcher and more like a lunatic. The pig, of course, had no plan. It didn't want freedom. It didn't even want to run. It just knew it could, and that was enough. It went straight into the church courtyard. Of course it did. Knocked over a candle stand, headbutted a monk, and very nearly desecrated a holy relic before turning around and charging out like it had seen the face of God and didn't approve. The priest later called it a test of faith. You called it Wednesday. Catching it was a group project. You, your apprentice, 3 kids with a broken net, and a dog that thought this was the best day of its life. After 20 minutes of sprinting, sliding, yelling, and one unfortunate collision with a cabbage cart, the pig ran straight back into your stall and stood there, panting like it had simply gone out for errands. You slammed the gate shut, collapsed against the wall, and swore in 4 languages. The crowd cheered like you just saved the kingdom. Someone threw a turnip. You're not sure if it was meant as a gift or an insult, but it hit your apprentice, so you considered it a win. Later, when the pig was finally slaughtered and hung, you noticed a bruise on its side, shaped exactly like a candlestick. You said nothing. The priest said nothing. The pig said nothing, because you made sure of it. And the next morning, you tied the next one up yourself, with 3 knots. Nobody wakes up hoping to be inspected. Especially not you, and especially not by the man who once failed to arrest a baker for selling moldy rolls and decided to make your stall his personal redemption arc. His name is Gerald, or Godwin, or something that starts with G and rhymes with go away. He wears a faded cloak, carries a brass seal of authority, and acts like he's personally responsible for preventing the next plague by harassing you specifically. He doesn't announce himself, just shows up, walks slow, like a man who enjoys the suspense. He starts with the meat, pokes it, sniffs it, frowns, never says a word, just makes this wheezing sound like your liver offends him on a spiritual level. Then he checks your scales, which you've had since your grandfather bartered them from a blacksmith who may or may not have been blind. Your apprentice tries to look helpful. Gerald ignores him. Then he heads for the buckets. Yes, those buckets. The awful ones. He always finds something to criticize. Too close to the walkway. Not properly covered. Looks like it's thinking about going bad. Once he made you throw out half a sheep because the fat had turned slightly yellow. That was summer. Everything was yellow. You could bribe him. You've done it before. A couple coins. A kidney. Once, during Lent, you gave him an entire smoked eel, and he smiled for the first and only time in recorded history. But bribes don't always work. Sometimes he's in a mood, or he's trying to impress a guild official, or he's just had an argument with his wife and wants someone else to feel small. He never inspects the fishmongers, or the bakers, or the spice seller who openly waters down his cinnamon with dirt. Just you, every time. You've considered reporting him, but who would you report him to? He is the inspector. He signs his own paperwork. You could write a letter, but you'd have to pay someone to read it first. You tried being friendly. Once, offered him a drink, called him Master Godwin. He looked you in the eye and said, "There's meat on that cleaver that wasn't inspected." You said, "It's my dinner." He said, "Then I suggest you fast." That was the end of that. And when he finally leaves, usually after an hour of muttering and glowering and poking things that don't need poking, he doesn't say goodbye, just walks off, trailing suspicion like a bad smell. You watch him go, then immediately check what he wrote in his little book, usually just one word: observed. You'd love to observe him try this job for one day. You'd even give him a clean apron, assuming you had one. Everyone else loves feast days. There's music, bread, wine, and an excuse to pretend life isn't a miserable struggle against God's indifference. But you wake up earlier than the roosters, ankle deep in blood before the church bells even ring. Because when the rest of the town is stuffing its face, you're working like a condemned soul in the kitchen of hell. Feast days don't mean more food. They mean more slaughter. Pigs, goats, geese, maybe even a cow if some baron's nephew got knighted or a saint's toe was discovered nearby. And here's the best part. You don't get extra pay, you get blessings. You know what blessings don't buy? Salt, or shoes, or the ability to sleep past sunrise without a pig screaming in your face. The church places orders, like you're running a cheerful little deli. 3 lambs, whole, sausage for the choir boys, and something impressive for the bishop's table, but not too fatty. He's watching his humors. Great. Guess who's trimming fat off a dead animal at midnight with a knife that hasn't been sharp since Easter? And of course, it's not just the church. The wealthy want their tables full too. Your stall gets mobbed the day before the feast. Everyone wants the good cuts, which means arguing with peasants over ribs that haven't even been carved yet. You point to a side of beef still hanging, blood dripping into a bucket. That one, they squint. Too bony. Preparation is chaos. You've got 3 apprentices, two of whom are probably drunk. The firewood's damp, the pig won't stop kicking after it's already dead, and someone keeps stealing liver from the cooling shelf. You suspect the dog, you also suspect the priest, but you can't prove it and he outranks you. Then comes the real treat. Delivery. Dragging half a carcass across town in the sun, while children point and one guy offers you a crust of bread like that's going to undo the 3 hours you just spent skinning a sheep that died angry. You drop off the meat, say nothing, and go back for more. You're not thanked, you're barely seen. By the time the feast actually starts, your clothes are soaked, your hands are shaking, and your stomach is empty. The town eats. You collapse in a corner with a crust of stale rye and a warm jug of something that might have been wine 3 days ago. No one saves you a seat. No one offers you a plate. You just sit there, smelling the food you killed yourself to make, and try not to pass out in the offal bucket. Happy feast day. Meat is a lot of things in medieval Europe. Valuable, rare, sacred on some tables, but one thing it never is: patient. The second an animal dies, the countdown begins. There's no icebox, no walk-in. Just you, a warm carcass, and a clock made of smell. You've got hours before it turns into something the dogs won't even touch. Hope you weren't planning on eating or blinking today. Summer is a nightmare. Even before noon, the sun turns your stall into an open-air oven. You hang meat on hooks that are too close together because there's never enough space, and watch the flies form their own militia. You wave them away. They come back stronger. You throw vinegar on the slabs, light herbs, cover the meat with cloth. Nothing works. The flies always win. Winter doesn't help much either. Sure, it's colder, but now everything's stiff. The fat hardens. The blood freezes. You try cutting a side of pork and it shatters like pottery. You can't feel your fingers, but you still have to make perfect cuts for a merchant who wants something tender for his stew pot. Good luck explaining frostbite to a man who thinks meat just magically grows in linen sacks. And heaven help you if you're late to market. You get there early, and it's frostbite. You get there late, and it's spoilage. 1 hour can turn prime cuts into a glistening, slippery mess with a hint of green around the edges. The people buying it don't care if you've been awake since before the rooster knew it was morning. They want a deal. They want the best part. They want it now. You try to rotate stock, but the stall isn't a shop. There are no shelves. There's no back room. There's just whatever you can stack on planks, wrap in cloth, or bury in salt until it stops dripping. You sell the oldest stuff first, or you try to, but some customers like to poke and sniff and lift the edge of the cloth just enough to ruin everything. One poke and it's off the list. You eat that one tonight. Maybe, if the cat doesn't get to it first. Your apron is never clean. It's crusted in layers. Blood, fat, ash, more blood. You tell yourself that dried meat is better than rotted meat, which is technically true but not comforting. Your hands smell like a crime scene, no matter how much you rinse them in cold water. You dream of soap like a knight dreams of glory, unrealistically, and when the day's over, if the day ever really ends, you don't rest. You scrape the stall clean. You salt down the leftovers. You sharpen your cleaver with a stone that's seen more regret than edge. You think about sleep. Then remember the goat still needs gutting. The pig for tomorrow still needs bleeding. The liver's starting to turn. You nod, get up, and keep going. Because the meat doesn't wait, and neither can you. They don't call it that, of course. That would be too honest. They call it dues or guild fees or civic meat handling ordinances, as if slapping a fancy name on it changes the fact that you're handing over a chunk of your hard-earned coin, or worse, a chunk of your best meat to people who've never held a cleaver in their lives. Congratulations, you're now paying to do a job no one wants. It starts small, a copper here, a slice of sausage there, to help maintain standards, they say, as if anyone inspects the blood-soaked straw you work on, or the rats that treat your stall like a tavern. Then comes the real demand, a monthly meat offering to the guildmaster, his clerk, the inspector, and whatever cousin they've decided needs feeding this week. If you don't comply, a fine. If you still don't comply, suddenly your stall isn't within regulations, and you're selling pork in the mud with the weavers. You try to argue once. You bring them cuts, good ones, shoulder roast, salted tongue, fresh fat. The guildmaster takes it, chews slowly and says, "This is acceptable. Next month, bring more." He doesn't thank you. He just leaves grease on your bench and a permanent dent in your patience. You consider spitting in the next delivery. Then you remember he knows where you live. It's not just the guild. The church gets its share too. During holy days, a priest might stop by and say he's collecting alms in the form of edible donations. You give him a rack of ribs. He gives you a blessing. You'd prefer cash, but God doesn't issue refunds. Then there's the baron's steward, who takes what he wants and mumbles something about provisions for the household. He's got 5 teeth and a dagger, so you smile and wrap up a haunch like it's a gift basket. And it keeps happening. Week after week, you're not selling meat. You're fending off beggars in nice robes. The worst part? They always act like they're doing you a favor, like accepting your labor for free elevates you. You're contributing, supporting the community, building goodwill. Funny how goodwill never helps you buy salt. One time, you tried to hide the good cuts, tucked them behind a curtain. A boy saw, ran off. Next day, you're summoned to the guild hall and fined for withholding product. You pay it in silence, then come home to find someone's let your goat loose and someone else has taken your best knife. Coincidence? Not a chance. You stop hiding meat. You stop questioning the tax. You start setting a few things aside at the start of the day, not for customers, but for the people who take without paying. You don't call it tithing. You don't call it dues. You just call it surviving. And you get back to work before someone adds another fee. It doesn't hit you right away, not when you first start. The stink creeps in slow. At first, it's just your clothes, your apron, your sleeves, the hem of your tunic soaking up blood and fat like some cursed sponge. But after a few weeks, it's your boots, then your bedroll, then your hair, then your skin. Eventually, it stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you are. You try everything: cold water rinses, vinegar scrubs, rubbing your hands with salt until they feel like wood. You even try the herbal stuff from the apothecary, expensive little pouches that promise to drive out corruption. All they drive out is your money. You smell like rosemary for half a day, then it's right back to death and fat stew. People notice. Oh, they notice. At first it's subtle. People standing a bit farther from your stall, holding their breath while they inspect the liver. Then it's more obvious. Gagging noises, muttered prayers, children asking why you smell like bad bacon. You get used to hearing footsteps stop when you walk into a room. You also get used to hearing them start again, walking the other way. You don't get invited places, not to dinners, not to weddings, not even to funerals, which is ironic, considering your job and death share a lease. Your neighbors tolerate you, barely. You're useful, but not welcome. The baker won't take coin from your hands. The seamstress makes you leave your measurements in a jar. The priest avoids eye contact unless you're holding a donation. You try to stay clean as a butcher can be. You change clothes. You wash your tools. You even built a barrel behind your stall just for rinsing off. But no matter what you do, the smell sticks. It clings, not just to your body, but to your life. Your house smells. Your bed smells. You can't even tell anymore. The only way you know is because strangers wrinkle their noses before you speak. Your apprentice once said, "It's like we're made of meat now." He wasn't wrong. You laugh, but it's hollow. Because under the layers of linen and grime, that's what you are. Meat handling meat, pretending to be something else. You used to dream of being respected. Now you dream of just smelling like nothing at all. And sometimes in the quiet hours, After the last pig's been bled and the coals are dying down, you catch a whiff of yourself and gag. Not because it's new, but because it never goes away. You are your own warning sign, a walking advertisement for the price of staying fed. And in this town, you'll always be known not by your name, but by your stench. Let's clear up a myth. There's no art to butchery. Not here, not now. There's no delicate slicing under candlelight, no graceful ballet of blades like you see in royal kitchens. What you've got is a worn table, a dull knife, and a backlog of animals that need to stop being animals before sundown. Your hands aren't sculpting meat, they're fighting it. Every cut is a struggle, every joint a puzzle, every day a repeat of the same slow war between flesh, bone, and your crumbling fingers. The knives you have aren't good. They're not even knives most of the time. They're battered hunks of iron that you've sharpened so many times the blades are thinner than your patience. You inherited some of them, made others yourself, and bartered for the rest with a blacksmith who couldn't believe anyone would want a blade shaped like a crescent moon and chipped like bad pottery. But here you are. They bend, they dull, they never match. You've labeled them with notches and dried blood, just so you know which one won't betray you mid-cut. And the cutting never ends. Morning till dark, it's shoulders, flanks, necks, ribs. Chickens are the easy ones, unless they're still half alive and flapping while you're trying to behead them one-handed. Goats are twitchy. Pigs are worse. They scream long after they're supposed to be quiet. Cows are gods of resistance. Every time you break one down, you walk away with a new bruise, a torn muscle, or a sliced-up thumb from hitting bone wrong. You don't say anything anymore. You just bandage it with whatever's dry and keep going. The work doesn't just hurt in the moment. It lives in your bones. You've lost count of how many times you've cut the same tendon in your hand. Your fingers are thick with scar tissue. Your knuckles click when it's cold, lock up when it's wet, and sometimes swell to twice their size without warning. You can't grip a mug without pain, can't sleep without your hands twitching, can't even pray properly because your palms won't close all the way anymore. Your body is slowly turning into a tool, and not a good one. No one teaches you posture. No one talks about joint health. You stand crooked over a bench that's the wrong height, twisting your spine for hours while shifting your weight from one aching foot to the other. Your knees hate you. Your back gave up on you years ago. You don't stretch. Who has time to stretch? You wake up sore, you go to bed sore, and in between you try not to think about how you're only 30 and feel 75. The village healer tells you to rub your hands with goose grease and say a prayer. You'd rather punch a wall, if you still could. But what really grinds your soul down isn't just the pain, it's the repetition. The exact same motions, every day, every cut, every joint. You dream about cuts. You dream about separating vertebrae. You'll be lying in bed at night, half asleep, and your hand will spasm like it's still holding a cleaver. You go to market and stare at a table leg and think, that's about the size of a calf bone. This job doesn't just break your body, it rewires your brain. And for what? A few coins? Some spoiled meat? A reputation as the guy no one wants to sit next to at mass? You don't get praise for good knife work. No one ever says, that mutton was beautifully deboned. They just complain if there's gristle or ask for a discount if the cut isn't symmetrical. And yet here you are, again staring down at a half-flayed hog, wrists screaming, legs numb, neck stiff, carving meat like it's going to save your soul. Spoiler, it won't. Here's the problem with meat. It doesn't stay meat for long. Not the good kind, anyway. You kill it, clean it, cut it, and then it starts dying all over again in a much less useful way. There's no refrigeration, no ice house, no secret cellar with magical cold stones, just salt and smoke and prayer, a lot of prayer. Salt is your first line of defense, if you can afford it, which is hilarious, because you can't. Salt is expensive, more expensive than anything that doesn't bleed. Some say it's worth more than gold, which is deeply insulting when you're trying to stretch a single sack over 3 sheep and a pig carcass. You rub it in with your bare hands, pack it into cuts, stack the meat on slanted shelves so the brine runs out instead of back in. That's the theory, anyway. In practice, it drips everywhere, and your floor turns into a murder swamp. If you're lucky, and the weather isn't fighting you, the salt pulls out the worst of the moisture. The meat turns dry, stiff, a little gray, but that's better than bubbling green and attracting more flies than the privy during a fair. Of course, sometimes the salt burns the meat. Too much, and it hardens into something between jerky and roof tile. Too little, and it gets soft around the edges, and you get that smell, the one that means throw it to the dogs before someone vomits. Then there's smoking. Smoking is good when it works. You hang the meat in a little hut filled with wet wood and hope you don't asphyxiate. The smoke chokes the mold, keeps the rats back, and adds flavor, allegedly. You can't actually taste the flavor over the bitterness of your own survival instincts, but it's something. You sit in that hut for hours, coughing, eyes watering, flipping sides of bacon, and muttering to yourself like a man who's seen too much. Because you have. Of course, even salt and smoke won't save you from humidity, vermin, or the occasional helpful neighbor who decides to borrow a bit of your stock while you're at church. You come back and notice something's missing. You confront them. They shrug, say it must have been a dog. The same dog that apparently knows how to untie knots and relace your string after it's done stealing. Spoilage is inevitable. No matter how careful you are, something always goes bad. A joint too close to the door, a goose that didn't drain right, a haunch that was a little too old to begin with. You can't sell it, not really. So you cut off the worst bits, wrap it in extra cloth, and pray the buyer's nose isn't as sharp as their tongue. If they complain, you offer a discount. If they come back angry, you say it was fresh when it left your hands. And technically it was. And in the worst case, you eat it yourself. Not because you want to, but because you won't waste what could still be food. You stew it long enough to kill whatever was growing, salt it again to hide the flavor, and convince yourself that sour meat is an acquired taste. Your gut protests, your apprentice gags, but you chew it down. Because in your world, meat that doesn't rot is a miracle, and you gave up on miracles a long time ago. You'd think the worst part of butchery is the killing, or the cutting, or the smell. But no, the worst part is standing in your stall at the end of the day, surrounded by bones, scraps, and a growing crowd of people, pretending not to beg. Because the meat is gone, and now they're here for what's left. The fat, the marrow, the cracked ribs, the slivers clinging to tendon and gristle. They want the parts no one wants, because they have even less. They come quietly at first. Poor folks, bent backs, bare feet, cloaks that used to be sacks, a mother with a baby on her hip, an old man holding a cracked bowl. They don't ask outright. They linger, shuffle close, comment on the weather, admire your knife. You pretend not to see them, because once you do, once you make eye contact, it's over. You're part butcher, part charity, part guilty conscience in a blood-stained apron. Sometimes you give them scraps, sometimes you don't. Depends on the day, depends on how much you've already had stolen, spoiled, or snatched by your apprentice when he thought you weren't looking. Depends on whether the tax collector was unusually cruel that week. Depends on whether you've eaten yet. You wrap up a rib that's mostly bone, hand it over, and watch the mother smile like you just saved her child's life. It doesn't feel good. It just feels heavy. And then come the others. Not the hungry, the clever, the ones who know how to make profit from waste. Candle makers, glue boilers, soap traders. If they're fancy, they want hooves, tallow, bones with just enough marrow to matter. You give them a price. They laugh. They offer half. You argue. They threaten to take their business to the next stall, as if anyone else has enough leftovers to matter. Eventually, you settle for too little coin and a new reason to curse. You try to keep the scraps organized, but that's a fantasy. Everything ends up in piles. Buckets, crates, a mix of edible, inedible, questionable. Some things rot before you can move them. Some get swiped, some go to the dogs, literally. And you don't even feel bad because they watch your stall like unpaid guards. There's a mutt you've named Taxman because he takes what he wants and never explains himself. Worse still are the kids. Not apprentices, actual street rats, half-starved, nimble, and absolutely without shame. They dart in while your back is turned, grab a fistful of bone bits or fat clumps, and vanish. You'd be angry if they didn't remind you of yourself at their age. Once you caught one digging through your awful bucket. You shouted. He flinched, dropped a liver, ran. The next day you left a wrapped bundle behind the stall, said nothing. He never made eye contact again, just nodded. That was enough. And when it's all over, you're still not done. You scrape the boards, rinse the buckets, try to get the stink out of the stall before it attracts anything bigger than a dog. You look at what's left. Cracked bones, dried blood, a smear of something unidentifiable, and realize most of what you moved that day wasn't even meat, just reminders of it. Ghosts of meals, trash to some, treasure to others, and somehow it all passed through your hands. Nobody talks about this part. Not the guild, not the priests, not the customers slicing ham with their smug little knives. They all like to pretend the meat just appears, pre-cut, quietly obedient, already dead and cleaned by divine will. But you know the truth. Every animal that passes through your stall fights for its life, and sometimes it wins. Pigs are the worst. Pigs are smart. Too smart. They know. The moment you walk into the pen with rope or blade, they scream, not grunt. Scream. A horrible, high-pitched, choking shriek that sounds like a child being dragged to the gallows. It gets into your skull and stays there. You've heard it so many times that silence feels unnatural. You dream in squeals. You wake up already bracing for the next one. You try to calm them, feed them, pet them, tie them gently. Sometimes it works. Most times it doesn't. They bolt. They twist. They bite. One sow broke your apprentice's finger in 3 places and nearly crushed your foot. You still limped through the slaughter. No one cares that you're injured. They care if the pig bleeds too slow and the meat spoils. Cows are different, slower, heavier. But they don't go quietly either. They resist with weight, not speed. You tie them to the slaughter post, and they dig in their hooves and stare at you with eyes that look too human for comfort. You try to be efficient. You mutter a prayer. Then you drive the blade in fast and deep. And even then, they don't always fall right. There's kicking, thrashing. One nearly snapped your arm with a backwards kick last winter. You tied it tighter the next time. Still limped for weeks. Goats are wiry and unpredictable. 1 minute they're eating out of your hand, the next they're airborne and trying to escape over the stall wall. Chickens don't scream, but they flap like they think they have somewhere better to be. And more than once you've had to chase a headless one halfway across the yard, hoping no one's watching. There's no dignity in any of it. Not for them, not for you. And you feel it. You pretend you don't. You talk tough. It's just meat. You call it routine, necessary, God-ordained. But there are days you look into those eyes, feel the muscle twitch under your hands, and something inside you twinges. Not guilt, exactly. You gave up guilt ages ago. It's more like exhaustion, the kind that settles in your bones and makes your skin feel too tight. Butchers aren't killers. Not really. You don't get paid to enjoy this. You get paid to survive it, to make the cut fast, to bleed them right, to keep the meat clean even when your soul isn't. You've seen animals die badly, too slow, too painful. Those are the ones that stick with you. You try to forget. You rinse your hands. You salt the meat. You smile at the customer. You sharpen the blade. Then you do it all over again the next morning, praying the next pig doesn't look at you like it knows what's coming. You don't choose an apprentice. He just shows up one day. some cousin of a neighbor, some widow's boy who needs direction. You say you need help. What you get is a pair of shaky hands, a vacant stare, and someone who thinks pigs die quietly and meat walks itself to market. He's 12 maybe, or 15. You can't tell, and he doesn't seem to know either. Just a bundle of limbs and bad decisions with a name like Ralph, or Tad, or hey, you with the cleaver. First week? Useless. You tell him to clean the hooks. He cleans them with the same rag he used to wipe the pig's backside. You tell him to salt the liver. He salts the fat, forgets the liver, then leaves the salt outside in the rain. You tell him to hold the leg still while you carve. He drops it. It hits the dirt. A dog grabs it and runs. You yell. He cries. You stare at the dog, holding your day's earnings in its jaws, and contemplate becoming a monk. Second week, he starts to settle. He stops gagging at the sight of blood, which is an improvement. But now he talks too much, asks questions, dumb ones. Do cows feel it? Do flies sleep? What happens if we eat the green bits? You try to ignore him, but it's like working beside a philosophical turnip. You tell him to focus. He nods, then nearly loses a finger trying to cut marrow out of a bone you told him not to touch. He doesn't clean the knives properly. He puts the cleaver back in the wrong place. He forgets to tie the bucket lids and leaves the offal out where cats fight over it. You told him once, never leave fat overnight. He forgets. The next morning, you find it half melted, crawling with maggots. You ask him why he didn't cover it. He shrugs, says the wind scared him. You stare, wonder if wind ever scared you when you were hungry enough to swallow raw tripe just to avoid wasting it. But then, sometimes, he gets it right. He carries a side of pork across town without dropping it. He guts a fish clean. He sharpens your second best knife without chipping the blade. You pretend not to notice, but you do. You catch him watching you work, mimicking your grip. You see how he flinches less now, how he's starting to know which way the joints bend, how he doesn't ask where to dump the blood anymore, he just does it, quick and quiet. And you remember being him, not knowing where to put your feet, not knowing which parts go to market and which go to stew. You remember ruining a whole haunch because you cut against the grain, and your master nearly threw you out. You remember the first time a pig squealed like it knew your name. You remember learning that death makes a sound, and how long it lingers. So you teach him, slowly, through grunts, hand gestures, sarcasm, and the occasional shove away from the boiling pot. You don't say much, but he learns, because he has to. Because this isn't a trade you survive by being clever, it's one you endure by being stubborn. And someday, if he's lucky, he'll hate it a little less than you do. There's a certain trust between a butcher and his tools. It's not affection, that'd be weird, but it's close. Familiarity? You know the balance of your cleaver, the slight warp in your boning knife, the way your smallest blade pulls left if you don't steady the spine with your thumb. You spend more time gripping steel than you do holding anything else in your life. It becomes part of you. Which is why, when the knife slips, it doesn't feel like a simple mistake. It feels like betrayal. You're doing what you always do. Same cut, same motion, same grip, but the meat's colder than expected, or hotter, or the edge caught on something wrong. The pig jolted, your apprentice distracted you, the board shifted, the world wobbled, and suddenly you're the one bleeding. It's a bad cut. You know that instantly. You don't need the healer's chance to tell you that this one's going to leave a mark, and maybe more than that. It's deep, right across the web of your hand. You feel the blade open you before you see the blood. There's that half-second delay, the body still catching up, and then the warm rush that tells you just how much trouble you're in. Blood in the meat stall is normal. It's everywhere. It coats your apron, your boots, the floor, the gutters outside, the very air on hot days. But this blood is different. It's brighter. Too fast, it pulses, and it smells wrong. Too clean, too human. You pull your hand back and drop the knife, which clatters across the stones and lands blade first in a crate of ribs. No time to care. You clutch the wound with your other hand and press hard. Your apprentice is frozen. Of course he is. He stares at your hand like it's some dark miracle. "Get the cloth," you growl, trying not to let your voice shake. "The clean one." He bolts, nearly trips, fumbles the cloth, hands you the wrong one first, the rag you used to wipe blood from the slab earlier. You toss it aside, swearing, and grab the clean one yourself. Pressure helps, but not much. The blood keeps coming. Your palm is wet, your arm sticky. You grit your teeth, no crying out, not in front of the customers. And yes, there are still customers. One woman has the decency to look horrified. Another asks if the beef tongue is still for sale. You nod. She shrugs. "It's just a cut," she says, like she's the expert now. You want to scream. The thing about wounds like this is that they steal your future a little at a time. You're not just hurt, you're slowed. You can't grip the cleaver right, can't tie off the gut string, can't twist the joints the way you've done 1,000 times. And every second you're injured, the meat keeps aging, drying, spoiling. You don't just bleed, you lose income. You should stop, go home, rest, but you won't. Because this job doesn't forgive rest. You have orders to fill, salt to rub, bones to crack, liver to package before the heat ruins it. So you wrap the hand tight, like a roast. You press your thumb into the bandage until the pain becomes background noise, and you pick the knife back up. The edge is red now, yours. You wipe it clean, sort of, and keep going. You grip with your good hand and guide with the injured one. Slower, messier. But it works for now. You switch to tasks that don't need pressure, sorting, measuring, cursing under your breath while trying not to faint. Your apprentice offers to help. You don't answer. You don't trust him, not with your knives. By nightfall, the bandage is soaked. You peel it back and wince. The wound is swollen, red around the edges. You mutter a prayer, not because you believe it'll help, but because it's the only thing you've got left besides vinegar and a strip of last week's linen. You clean it. It stings. You pour brine over it. It stings more. You grit your teeth and keep working. You don't know what infection looks like, not exactly, but you know how it smells. You hope you don't wake up to that. In the coming days, you pretend it's getting better. You tell people it's healing. You wave with your other hand, but your grip gets worse. The ache creeps up your arm, slow and sharp. You miss a cut, drop a cleaver, shout at your apprentice for something he didn't do. He flinches. You don't apologize. At night, the pain keeps you awake. You wrap it in cool cloth, then warm. You ask the healer for herbs you can't afford. He gives you bark and root paste and says, keep it dry. You work with blood and brine and meat that leaks. Dry isn't an option. You nod anyway. You apply the paste and hope it doesn't just attract flies. The worst part isn't even the pain, it's the fear. The creeping knowledge that if this doesn't heal right, it's over. You'll be the butcher who can't cut. The man with one good hand and a reputation for being slow. And slow means broke, means hungry, means no apprentice, no stall, no place in the guild. You've seen what happens to injured workers. They disappear. You try to train your offhand. You hold the blade differently. Practice the cuts on scraps. It's clumsy, and everything takes twice as long. You pretend it's fine. You lie. You tell your customers it's a sprain. You tell your apprentice it's just sore from overwork. You tell yourself it'll pass. One morning, you wake up and it's no worse. That feels like a victory. The swelling has stopped. The cut is still ugly, still tender, but it's closed. You flex it, and it doesn't bleed. You breathe out, like you've been holding your breath for a week, because you have. But you'll never trust your hand the same way again. You sharpen your blade a little more carefully now. Move slower. Pay attention, because now you know the knife doesn't care who it cuts, and when it slips, no one saves you. Not the customer, not the church, not even your apprentice, who still asks if cows feel it when they die. You look at your hands, calloused, scarred, worn. And now, one of them carries a new memory. Not just of pain, but of what you stand to lose. You press your palm against the cutting board and pick up the cleaver again. There's work to do, always. You've just gutted a pig. Your apron is soaked. Your hands are raw, your knees ache. You haven't eaten since dawn, and even that was just a crust dipped in sour broth. You're trying to wipe down your board before the flies start building a colony, and then she arrives. She's got that look, the look of someone who's already decided you're cheating her before she even opens her mouth. One hand on her hip, a coin purse dangling from the other. She doesn't greet you, just starts pointing. "That's not fresh," she says. "It is. You bled the pig yourself this morning, before the sun cleared the roofline." She saw you do it. Everyone did. It squealed like it was testifying. She walked past with her bucket and made a face. But now? Now it's too pale, or too soft, or too something. You say nothing. You just lift the cut shoulder, cleanly skinned, still warm at the core, and place it on the scales. She scoffs. "That's not 2 pounds. You know your weights. You've been doing this for 20 years. You could measure a side of beef blindfolded and come within an ounce." The scale tilts, balanced, but she doesn't trust the weights. Says they're rigged, says your counter is warped, says your eyes are shifty, like someone who charges extra for bone weight. You want to ask what kind of butcher has shifty eyes and still lets people watch him slaughter hogs in public. Instead, you breathe. You say, "This is the price. Take it or leave it." She haggles. Everyone haggles. It's expected, part of the dance. But this isn't a dance. This is a siege. She wants half off. Says her husband could get better cuts from the next stall over. The stall that gets their pigs from you, funny enough. She waves her coin like it's a blade. You stand your ground. She leans in and whispers, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You watered the blood." That one hurts. Not because it's true, it's not, but because of what it means, that you're dishonest. That you're cheating not just her, but the guild, the town, the market's honor. That you're the sort of man who'd pour brine over a cutlet to fake freshness, who'd rub salt in a spoiled joint and call it preserved. There's no worse insult for a butcher than being called a liar. You could be dirty, you could be loud, you could even be cruel, but dishonest? That sticks. You look around. People are watching now, listening, pretending they're not. You recognize half the faces. The blacksmith who buys oxtail for his stew, the baker who always wants extra lard, a priest's servant eyeing the tripe. They don't say anything. They just wait to see how you handle it. You wipe your hands. You pick up the cut. You press your thumb to it. Firm, fresh, slightly warm. "This pig was alive before matins," you say. "I slaughtered it myself. My apprentice watched. The scales are fair. The cut is clean. If you think I'm lying, go buy elsewhere." Silence. She doesn't leave. Of course not. Because she still wants the meat. Just not at that price. Not without the performance. She grumbles, drops 3 coins on the counter, still less than she owes, but enough to make her feel like she won something. You wrap the cut in cloth and slide it across. She doesn't say thank you. She just leaves. And you're left with her stink in the air, and your dignity hanging by a string. It doesn't end with her. She's not the only one. Every week, someone new decides you're trying to rob them. They question the weight, the age, the color, the smell. They ask why this meat's more expensive than last week's, why this ham has more fat, why this sausage looks darker than the last one. You explain. The pig was older, the feed changed, the weather's been hot. They don't care. They think you're hiding something. You're not. You're just tired. People think butchers are rough. Some are, but most of you are just worn out from arguing about things no one wants to understand. Like why liver has to be cooked the same day, why kidneys can't sit in the sun, why a leg from a nursing sow costs more than one from a barren boar. They don't care about the animal's age or health or what you fed it. They care about two things: price and bragging rights. Worst of all are the experts, the ones who read half a farming manual, written 50 years ago, and now think they know more about meat than you do. They sniff, they poke, they quote nonsense about ideal marbling. They say things like, "My cousin says the best cuts come from the right side of the animal." You want to ask if their cousin also believes the moon controls blood flow, but you bite your tongue, and the guild, they don't help. If a customer complains loud enough, you're the one who gets called in, not her. Not the guy who stole sausages, or the boy who tried to swap your lard for a rock wrapped in cloth. You. You stand in front of the guildmaster, holding your apron in one hand, your hat in the other, and try to explain why 3 people said your beef was too red, as if that's a crime now. You wonder sometimes if it's worth it. The years, the sweat, the stink. You provide the town with its food, and still they act like you're selling them lies in sausage form. You lie awake at night replaying conversations. It's too thin. It's too thick. It's not salted right. You remember every insult, every accusation, every sideways glance. And yet the next morning, you're up before dawn, cleaning, cutting, arranging your stall. You sharpen the knives, wipe the boards, hang the new joints. You wrap the sausages with extra twine so no one says they came loose. You prepare your face, firm, blank, neutral, not angry, not smug, just ready. Because they'll come. They always do, with their coins and complaints and suspicions, and you'll do it all again. Because this job isn't about being trusted. It's about being useful, about being necessary. You feed them. Whether they believe in your hands or not, they keep coming back, and so do you. There's no polite way to say this. You stink. Not in a charming, just finish the field sort of way. Not in a manly sweat and hard work way either. No, you stink like blood that's been walked through 6 times, like fat that's gone a bit too waxy in the heat, like animal breath that never left your clothes. You smell like death. You are death. Dried, smoked, salted, stewed, but always there in every fold of your tunic, every crease of your boots, every fiber of the apron that hasn't been properly cleaned since Candlemas. The day starts with stink, before the knives are even sharpened, before the gut buckets are hauled into place. The smell is already there, hanging in the stall like an old ghost that refuses to leave. You'd think it would fade. You'd think after a while your nose would adjust. It doesn't. What happens instead is worse. You get used to it, and that means you stop noticing when everyone else doesn't. You walk through the market, and people make room for you. Not respectfully, not fearfully, just noticeably. The air around you clears a little faster. People step sideways. Children stop running when they get near. You walk past the baker's stall, and his assistant lifts the edge of her scarf a little higher. You stand near the flower cellar, and the petals seem to wilt out of self-defense. It's in your hair, in your skin. Your pores leak salt and meat grease. You've tried washing. Gods know you've tried. Cold water in the yard, scrubbing with lye soap until your arms go raw. You've rubbed yourself with vinegar, with ash, with rosemary, when you could afford it. Doesn't matter. The smell always wins. You could bathe in perfume and still smell like boiled intestines by lunch. Your clothes don't help. The apron's leather, thick enough to stop a knife if you're lucky, but it holds everything. It absorbs blood like it's been waiting all its life to become part of the pig. You hang it at night. The next morning, it's stiff. You beat it against the wall. That only wakes up the flies. You put it back on. Warmth returns to it. So does the scent. There's a part of you that wonders if it's still alive, somehow just not in a way anyone wants. Even the tools smell, not just the obvious ones. The bone saw, the cleavers, the gut hooks, but the scale weights, the buckets, the worn-down wooden board you slice on. Everything carries the stink of what it's touched. You've had knives so old the handles reeked like ham, even after you sanded them down. You've boiled water for an hour, scrubbed the iron until it gleamed, and still, underneath there's always a trace of rot. Customers notice, but they pretend not to. They pinch their noses subtly. They lean back as you hand over the parcel. They tie the wrapping faster than they need to. You watch their hands. They always avoid brushing yours. They never stay long. Unless they're desperate. Then they endure it. Hunger does that. And your home? Don't even start. You try to leave the work behind. You change in the yard. You scrub your boots with brine. You hang your apron from a beam far from the door. Still the smell follows. It creeps in on your skin, your breath, your hair. The walls catch it. The floor absorbs it. Your wife says nothing, most nights. She just opens the window, even in the dead of winter. Your children? They smell it too. But they've learned not to mention it unless you ask. Once your daughter said you smelled like a sick dog. You laughed. She didn't. You held her that night, and she pulled away sooner than usual. That stung worse than the sharpest hook. And God help you if there's a festival. Everyone else dresses up, washes, smells like herbs and sweet wine and cakes. You scrub until your skin peels, put on your best tunic, the one with only a little blood staining the hem, and you still stand out. People wrinkle their noses as you pass. You sit alone. The space around you is always wider. No one wants to eat next to the man who makes their meat look like murder. There's irony here. Without you, the feast wouldn't happen. No roast lamb, no sausages, no cured hams. They want the meat, but not the man who made it meat. They want it sliced and safe, wrapped in steaming, but not the blood, the stink, the daily gut-deep familiarity with death. That's for you to carry, alone. You tried, once to pay for a public bath, just once. People stared. The other men moved to the far benches. One asked if you brought the pig with you. You smiled, laughed it off. Then you sat in cold silence, soaking in the water that turned cloudy in minutes. When you left, you heard someone mutter that the bath needed to be drained. You didn't go back. Sometimes, you wish you could forget what clean even is. It'd make this easier, but you remember. You remember being a boy, running barefoot through the grass, washing in a stream that didn't reek of boiled liver and old blood. You remember your mother's soap. She made it with herbs and beeswax. It smelled like summer. You haven't smelled that in 20 years. Now, the closest thing you get is smoke from the curing shed. At least that smell is useful. It means work. It masks the worst of the fat. You stand in there longer than you need to, sometimes. Let the smoke cling to your skin, your hair, your hands. Better to smell like wood fire than rot. You think maybe you've become the smell. Maybe it's not stuck to you. Maybe it is you. Your wife, when she kisses your cheek, doesn't flinch anymore. Maybe she's gone nose blind. Maybe she's just tired. You don't ask. You wouldn't want the answer. Some nights, you lie in bed and turn your face to the wall. The pillow smells like salt and meat. You bury your nose in your arm, and it smells the same. You breathe it in and wonder if your soul has taken it on too. If, when you die, the undertaker will wrinkle his nose and say, "This one was a butcher." And the truth is, you're not even mad about it anymore. Because someone has to do it. Someone has to hold the cleaver. Someone has to bleed the pig, gut the ox, salt the fat, scrape the intestines. Someone has to endure the smell no one wants to name. And if not you, you rise before dawn. You dress in silence. You tie on the apron, and as the first light hits the stall and the flies begin to stir, you take your place again. Because that stink, it's yours now. You've earned it. There are jobs that inspire respect. The blacksmith with his hammer and fire. The miller with his stones and flour. Even the town fool earns a kind of affection. At least he brings laughter. Then there's you. You're the butcher. The man with the knife. The one who lives too close to death for polite company. People need you, sure. They pay you. They nod when they see you in the market, but they don't really want to talk to you. Not for long, not without a reason. You're a necessary part of the town's rhythm, but you're not invited to the dance. They say it's because of the smell, and it is, but it's also more than that. You carry something else, something heavier, something people feel, even if they can't name it. You remind them of what they're eating, of what it once was, of how quickly life turns into meat. Children look at you like they're not sure whether to be fascinated or afraid. Some peek into your stall, wide-eyed, asking questions. Is that a tongue? Why is it purple? Did the cow cry? Their mothers pull them away, whisper something about manners. You're left standing there, holding a pig's head by the ears, wondering if this is what it means to be seen, but not known. You don't go to taverns much, not unless you have to. When you do, the air changes. Not immediately. Slowly, you step in, and the laughter doesn't stop, but it dulls. You sit down, and the men near you find reasons to shift seats. One leans back. Another takes his mug and joins a friend across the room. No one says anything. That's what makes it worse. It's not hostility. It's distance. Quiet, practiced, socially agreed upon. You used to fight it, tried to be friendly, tried to join the stories. You'd offer a joke, a nod, a mug raised in greeting. Sometimes they responded. Most times, they didn't. Not really. The jokes would change once you joined. The topic would shift. No one wanted to talk about slaughter over ale, and no one could forget that you were the man who did it. Some of them say things behind your back. You've heard the words, butcher-hearted, cold-handed. One priest once muttered that you were too close to Cain. You didn't rise to it. What would be the point? You've heard worse. You've seen the look a man gives you when he buys ribs and thinks about his own ribs, when he sees the line between animal and human and wonders how thick it really is. You're not dangerous, but you could be, and they know it. There's a quiet power in your work, and everyone feels it. The same hands that carve dinner could, if they wanted, end something else. You don't joke about that, ever, not even in jest, because that line, once crossed, never uncrosses. Weddings, you're invited to some, usually when meat is needed, not always to the ceremony, more often to the preparation. You've spent entire wedding days gutting geese out back, while laughter rings from the courtyard. You've carved roast on a table no one lets you sit at. You've cleaned up while everyone else danced. You get a plate sometimes, a coin, if they're generous, but not a chair. The irony is, you're probably one of the most honest men in town. You can't afford to lie. Your work is too visible, too immediate. If you cheat, the meat spoils. If you slack, the blood pools wrong. If you fake a cut, it shows. You don't have the luxury of pretense, but still, people look at you like you're hiding something, like your knives are sharper than they need to be. The women talk too, not to you, about you. The washerwoman said she'd never marry a butcher. The smell would haunt the sheets. The innkeeper's daughter told her friend she once saw you scrape a bone so clean it made her stomach turn. The midwife joked, loudly, that no one who spends that much time with guts can be trusted with feelings. They all laughed. You did not. But you've seen things they haven't. You've looked into the eyes of dying animals, felt their muscles twitch under your hands, heard their last sounds. You've smelled the inside of a body that didn't want to open. That changes a man, makes you quiet, careful, not cold, just precise. You handle things others can't. You don't flinch at blood. You know how to separate flesh from bone. You know what organs look like when they're healthy and when they're not. You could teach the town's healer a thing or two, but he wouldn't want to hear it. He thinks you're a brute. You think he smells like moldy roots and misplaced confidence. You've been asked once or twice to help with things you shouldn't. A man whose dog died. A priest who needed a sheep killed, but didn't want it seen. A neighbor who whispered that his goat wasn't acting right. You always said no, not because you couldn't, because you knew how fast a butcher could become something worse, and how slowly the town would forget that difference. Your apprentice doesn't understand it yet. He still smiles at people, still waves, still thinks the jokes are harmless. You don't tell him otherwise. He'll learn. Everyone does. You just hope he doesn't let it get to him too fast. You hope he keeps his laugh a little longer than you did. You dream, sometimes, of doing something else. Not because you hate the work. You don't. It's honest. It's clear. There's no pretending with meat. You cut it right, or it spoils. You know the rules, but you dream of quiet, of not being looked at sideways, of being just a man, not the reminder of what it takes to eat. But you wake up before dawn, pull on your apron, sharpen your blades, and walk to the stall, because this is who you are. This is the job. And if it makes people uncomfortable, well, that's not your fault. That's theirs. They want meat. They just don't want to see what it costs. You know what people picture when they think of a butcher. Steaks, chops, maybe a haunch, a roast, a rack of ribs so clean it belongs in a painting. They don't picture this. The part they don't want to name. The part they pretend doesn't exist after they walk away with their tidy little cuts. But you know it. You live with it. You scrape it, gut it, boil it, sell it. Awful. Lungs, livers, intestines, kidneys, stomachs, hearts, spleens, tripe, brains, feet, fat, all the soft and slippery things. The organs and tubes and membranes that hold a creature together until it dies and then fall apart in your hands. That's your daily companion. There's a reason they call it offal. Not from offal, though that's what it is most days, but from offal, what falls off the carcass when you start cutting. The waste, the leftovers, the part that hits the ground before anyone thinks to catch it. And in a town where nothing goes to waste, that means it becomes your problem. You gut the animal fast, because speed matters. The longer the intestines stay inside, the warmer they get. The warmer they get, the more they bloat. And when they bloat, they burst. And when they burst, you learn what real smell is. Not just death, not just rot, but everything the creature ever ate, half digested, now sliding down your boots. So you learn the feel of it. The subtle pull of gut from spine. The pop when the membrane gives. You slice carefully, gently, like you're unwrapping something sacred or dangerous. Which, in a way, you are. Most days you get it right. Some days you don't. And when you don't, the stall stinks for hours. The intestines are long, longer than people think, coiled like ropes, packed with the worst kind of treasure. You empty them into a bucket, then haul them to the trough. You turn them inside out, literally. You slide your hand through and flip the lining, wash it in brine, rub it with ash, rinse it again. If you're lucky, it only takes a few tries before the stink goes from unbearable to just foul. If you're not lucky, you do it all again. This isn't just cleanup, it's preparation. Because someone's going to eat this. Not the rich. They like their food polite. But the poor, the ones who'll buy boiled tripe or stuffed sausage made from actual pig gut. For them, offal is dinner. It's cheap, it's filling, and it's all they can afford. And they trust you to make it safe. So you boil it, skim it, salt it. You know the difference between good kidney and bad. One's smooth and firm, the other's mushy and yellow. You know when a liver's gone wrong. The veins bulge, the surface turns green. You've rejected more parts than you've sold, and still people complain about the price. Lungs are the worst. Spongy, gray-pink things that hiss if you squeeze too hard. You used to think they looked alive. Now you just think they're annoying. They don't keep well. They shrink weird. They turn slimy if left too long. But still, someone wants them. Usually stewed, usually cheap. You cut them fine and hope they don't ask what they're chewing. Brains go fast. Not because they're popular, because they're delicate. One wrong move and they liquefy. They slip through your fingers like spoiled pudding. You chill them in salt water, slice them cold, serve them with vinegar. They say it helps with headaches. You don't believe it. You've handled too many to think anything good comes from a sheep's brain. Feet are common. Hooves split, skin boiled, nails peeled. You chop the bones for soup, sell the cartilage to the broth makers. It's all about gelatin, the poor man's fat. It adds body. It masks hunger. A good foot can stretch a stew for 3 meals. A bad one just smells like hoof and disappointment. Fat is another beast. Pure, sticky, clingy. It melts in the sun, smears on your arms, turns your knives into butter paddles. But it's gold if you treat it right. Rendered down, it becomes lard. Cook with it, smear it, seal a wound if you're desperate. You hoard it, so do the bakers, so do the healers, so does anyone who knows what hunger really means. The worst offal, though, the one you hate the most, is the stomach. Not because it's useless, because it's not. It's useful, it's necessary, but it makes you hate your job a little every time you open one. There's something about the smell. Sour, tangy, like something rotting that doesn't know it's dead. The lining is thick, slimy, covered in folds and strings and bits of whatever the animal ate last. You scrape it with a dull blade, trying not to gag. You rinse it in lime, in ash, in salt. It still smells. It always smells. And still, someone wants it. Calls it a delicacy, comes to your stall and says, "Is that good tripe?" Like there's a bad kind that isn't awful. You don't get gloves. You don't get masks. You get rags and cold water. You get hands that never quite come clean, no matter how many times you wash them. You get under fingernails that could tell someone's diet from last week. You get skin that stinks no matter how much rosemary you crush into it. You get respect from no one, except maybe the dogs that follow you home. Even they don't beg, they wait. They know something always falls. Your apprentice asked once if you liked it, the awful work. You laughed, not kindly, not cruelly, just out of surprise, like someone had asked if you liked breathing dirty air. You told him it wasn't about liking, it was about doing. The meat makes money, the offal feeds people, and someone has to turn stomach into supper. He didn't ask again. You've gotten good at hiding the smell. You bury buckets deeper. You clean faster. You salt earlier. You know which parts to keep shaded and which ones to move fast. You've trained your eyes to spot rot before it blooms. You've trained your nose to flinch only a little. You've trained your voice to stay steady when a customer says, "This isn't fresh," and you know damn well it's better than what they had last week. You know off fail like a second language. You speak in membranes and texture. You read health in a liver, strength in a heart. You understand decay in ways that would make a priest weep. And you make it work, because the people who eat this, they're not fools. They're hungry. They deserve food that won't kill them. You do what you do because someone has to, and maybe, just maybe, there's a strange kind of honor in that. There's no such thing as a normal day when your job involves knives, blood, and open air. Every morning starts with hope and ends with a mess, and somewhere between those 2 points, you're just trying not to let the meat rot, your apprentice faint, or your lungs fill with fly eggs. Let's start with the weather, because if you think a little rain just ruins your mood, try working with meat in it. Rain is the enemy of everything. First, there's the splash. Dirt becomes mud. Mud becomes muck. The muck becomes your floor. That means boots slipping, scales tilting, and customers tracking filth into the already disgusting world you try, somehow, to keep sanitary. And that's the funny thing. You try to keep things clean, not because anyone gives you credit. They don't. But because you know what happens when you don't. Spoiled meat, infected wounds, customers who eat something slimy and then don't come back, not because they're angry, but because they're buried. So yes, even a butcher worries about hygiene. But rain? Rain laughs at that. The water drips down from the stall roof. Sometimes you have cloth overhangs. sometimes just wood planks. None of it keeps out the sideways wind. You patch it, stuff it, brace it, still leaks. Water pools in corners, runs in ruts, finds your salt stash and ruins it. Makes your cutting board slippery, makes your blades slide places they shouldn't. Once a cleaver slipped sideways and took a chunk of the stall post with it. Could have been your leg, could have been your customers. And then there are the flies. Flies are not an occasional nuisance. Flies are the constant, buzzing, soul-scraping soundtrack of your entire career. They don't just hover, they settle, they lay, they drink. You've seen them line up on liver like it's a banquet. You've watched them swarm a sheep's eye like it was offering confession. You try everything. Burn herbs, smear vinegar, wave rags like a madman. You even made a trap once. Honey and old wine in a bowl, covered with a cloth. Caught a few dozen, the rest just laughed and multiplied. They don't care if you're sweating, if your stomach's turning, if you've got a child asking, "What's that sound?" while a cloud of insects descends on a half-skinned rabbit. They're just doing their job, unlike your apprentice, who's gone missing again because the smell of brains being scooped out of a skull made him retch into a bucket. And then there's the wind, the kind that whips up when you've just finished arranging the stall. Cloths tight, cuts neat, buckets sealed. One good gust and your canopy flaps like a dying goose. Your paper wrappings scatter, your awful bucket tips over. You get to chase tripe through the mud, while the baker watches and doesn't even pretend not to laugh. Winter doesn't help either. You'd think cold weather might be your friend. It slows spoilage, it keeps the smell down. But try cutting through frozen joints with half-numb fingers. Try unhooking a beef haunch when your hands feel like wood. The meat is stiff, the cleavers bounce. You miss a chop and bruise the product or your thumb. You bleed and the blood freezes before it hits the stone. And summer? Summer is a punishment. The heat turns your stall into a slow-cooking oven. You have to work faster, or else everything goes soft, and soft meat doesn't sell. It sours, the fat turns waxy, the flies come harder, you're sweating before sunrise, you reek by mid-morning, and by midday, the smell of the stall could gag a dog. Let's not forget the dogs. They roam the alleys like little hairy gods of hunger. They know your routine better than your apprentice does. They appear the moment you unhook your first joint. They bark, they whine, they lick the stones under the table, looking for blood drops. Some are clever. One waited until you stepped away to piss and stole a whole basket of trotters. You chased him. You didn't catch him. You built fences, tied ropes, paid a boy to keep watch. Didn't matter. They're always there, always watching. And the worst part? You start to respect them. Because unlike the customers, they don't complain. They take what they can. They don't pretend it's clean. They know it's meat, and they want it. Simple. But it's not just weather and animals. There's also the constant threat of things breaking. Your stall is made from the same wood you started with 5 years ago, which means it creaks, sways, has one leg that doesn't quite touch the ground anymore. Every few weeks you find a new crack. Every few months, something snaps. One day the hook holding a lamb carcass gave out and dropped 20 pounds of animal onto your shoulder. You nearly dislocated it. The scale broke last winter, not from weight, from rust. You fixed it with a nail, a coin, and a prayer. It leans slightly, but no one's noticed yet. You hope it stays that way. The brine barrel leaks, the roof cloth tears, the salt bin collapsed during a downpour, and you had to scoop half-dissolved grains out with a spoon while customers watched. And through all of it, you just keep working, because if you stop to fix everything, you won't have anything left to sell. And then there's the people. You've dealt with children who run through the stall laughing, bumping into everything. One knocked over your liver display. His mother blamed you. You've had old men lean on your boards like they were tavern benches. A drunk pissed behind your stall once. You shouted, he shouted back. He didn't even buy anything. There's always someone who wants to see the back, who asks what else you've got. as if you're hiding a better cut behind the intestines, as if the bloody, fly-covered slab is just for show. They don't understand that you've been here since dawn, that your back aches, that your thumb hasn't stopped bleeding since you trimmed a mutton joint too fast. They see meat, they see price, they don't see the disaster happening around you, the rain in your collar, the flies in your mouth, the smell of failure cooking slowly under the summer sun. And at the end of it all, when you finally pack up, when the stall is half collapsed and your apprentice is asleep behind the brine barrel, you walk home, through mud, past dogs, with blood on your boots, and you know tomorrow it starts again. Because the meat won't wait, the flies never rest, and the disasters, they're not interruptions. They're the job. You might think, with your own stall, a reliable trade, and something to bring to every table in town, that you'd make a decent match. Not rich, not charming, not a knight in a tavern song, but stable. A man who works. A man with calluses, not secrets. A man who can feed a family. And you'd be right. But none of that matters. Because you're a butcher. And nobody wants to marry the butcher. It's not just the smell, though that's part of it. It's the rest of it. The death, the blood, the noise, the mess, the fact that your hands look like someone tried to scrub guilt out with salt and gave up halfway through. You don't wear ribbons. You don't play a lute. You don't own anything that doesn't come home stained. The town sees you as something between a craftsman and a cautionary tale. Children cross themselves when they pass your stall. Women keep their distance, unless they're buying, and even then, they don't linger. There's always a politeness, a nod, a quick transaction, never a pause, never a question that isn't about the meat. You notice it most on feast days, when the square fills with flowers and music, and everyone wears something clean. You see them, the couples, walking close, laughing too loudly, eating with both hands like it's a new sport. You see the women pass by your stall and glance, just once, and keep moving. They don't want to catch your eye, because you remind them of work, of mess, of the reality behind the roasted lamb and wine-soaked bread. You've tried. There was a girl, once, daughter of a tanner. She smiled at you at market, asked questions about how sausage was made, laughed when you said with regret and guesswork. You spoke twice more. You thought maybe you'd walk her home. Then her mother came by the stall one afternoon and told you quietly that her daughter would not be speaking to you again. No offense, just the way things were. You didn't argue. What would you say? I'm cleaner than I look. I only smell like this half the time. Yes, I kill animals, but I do it with care. You nodded. You said nothing. You chopped meat until your hands ached. And that night, the knife slipped. Your thumb still bears the scar. People think you're dangerous. Not in the way a knight is. Not brave dangerous. Not exciting dangerous. Just too close to the edge. They see the cleavers, the blood, the way you scrape a carcass with your teeth clenched like you're holding something back. You're not. But they don't know that, and they don't ask. Even the priests avoid you. They bless your stall on holy days, sure, but they don't linger. One muttered once that you carried too much death on your hands. As if that's your choice, as if the town's meat walks itself into tidy little cuts without anyone getting their hands dirty. You've seen men with nothing, drunks, gamblers, lads who haven't worked a full week in their lives, find wives before you, because at least they don't kill for a living. At least they don't come home every night, reeking of fear and fat and salt and bone. And the ones who do approach, the ones who say they don't mind, they mind. They always do. Maybe not at first. Maybe they smile through the first few weeks. Maybe they try to help. Maybe they even ask to learn the cuts. But then it happens. The first time they see a carcass split from spine to sternum. Or the first time a fly crawls out of a lung you haven't boiled yet. Or the first time they hear you, in your sleep, mumbling about kidneys. And then they pull away. You can't blame them. It's not a pretty life. It's not a clean one. You don't wear fine clothes. You don't smell like anything except salt and sinew. Your hands are always cut. Your eyes are always tired. And your clothes. Let's just say there's no such thing as your best shirt anymore. Only the one that's slightly less ruined than the others. You've thought about quitting. Not often. But the thought comes, late at night, when the stall's been quiet, when a widow refused to meet your eyes, when a child asked if your apron was made from the animals you kill. You think about doing something else, anything else, just to be seen as a person, not a profession. But then what? You've built your life on this. Your tools, your stall, your rhythm, the way your hands move without thinking, the way you can tell the weight of a pig's head just by how your back tilts when you lift it. You don't know anything else. And at this point, you're not sure the world would let you learn. So you keep working. You keep sharpening the knives. You keep buying pigs from farmers who call you brother and won't eat near you. You keep wrapping cuts for mothers who wrinkle their noses and pretend it's just the wind. You keep nodding to girls who won't nod back, and you keep waiting for someone who doesn't mind the blood. You know she probably won't come. You've made peace with that. You've built a life without her. But sometimes, when the stall is quiet, and the flies are slow, and the meat's already packed, you allow yourself the thought that maybe one day, someone will look past the apron, past the blades, past the smell. That someone will see the way you handle a cleaver and not flinch, the way you wrap a cut with care, the way you stand in the stall, tired, steady, necessary, and say, "This is a man." Until then, you keep working, because the town needs you. Even if no one wants to marry you, people tell themselves animals don't know, that they walk into the butcher's yard like they're going to market, that they don't flinch at the smell, that they don't sense the fear clinging to the wooden beams, that they're too stupid, too simple to understand what's waiting behind the gate. You know better. They know. They always know. It starts when they leave the field. Their heads shift more, their steps slow. Even if you're gentle, even if the rope is soft, they pull a little, like they're not sure why their hooves feel heavier, like their ears have caught something the humans haven't. Maybe it's the way the crows gather around the fence posts near your stall. Maybe it's the scent, copper, salt, old smoke. You've tried to hide it, burn herbs, wash the yard. It never quite leaves. The pigs are the worst, smart, too smart. They squeal the moment they hear another pig squeal. They smell what's under the straw. They see the blood in the sawdust and know it's not mud. You've had pigs bite ropes. One even snapped a board to try and turn around. You had to climb on top of it just to keep it still. By the time it was tied again, both of you were bleeding. Sheep get quiet. People think sheep are peaceful. That's because they shut down when they're afraid. You walk them toward the pen, and they stop responding. They go still, like they're trying to vanish. Sometimes they lie down and won't get up. You have to lift them, and you feel it, the weight of a creature that knows something is wrong and has given up on running. Cattle cry, deep, low. It's not the bellow they make when they're hungry or lost. It's lower, heavier, like they're speaking from the bottom of a well. The sound vibrates through your ribs. The first time you heard it, you dropped the knife. You thought it was the wind. It wasn't. Even the birds change. Chickens stop clucking. Ducks press themselves to corners. You don't need to cage them once they're in the yard. They don't try to fly. They just go still and wait for the shadow. There's a moment, always, right before the kill, when the air gets thick. You know it. The animal knows it. Your apprentice knows it, though he tries not to show it. Everyone holds their breath. The blade waits. You step forward, and something in the animal's body shifts. It knows. You've seen it in their eyes. That's not your imagination. There's a look, sudden, alert, too bright. You tell yourself it's reflex, that nerves twitch in ways that look like awareness, that they don't really feel fear like people do. You tell yourself that because if you didn't, the job would crush you. But part of you knows the truth. They know. Some customers think it's clean, that the animal doesn't suffer, that you say a prayer, swing the blade, and it's done. You don't tell them how many times you've had to pin a struggling lamb, or chase a goat that broke the rope, or hold down a pig while it kicked so hard it bruised your shin for a week. You've missed before. Everyone has. A blade slips. A cut goes shallow. The animal screams. That sound, it's not high. It's not loud. It's deep. Guttural. More like a cough wrapped in terror. You hear it in your sleep sometimes. You try to make it quick. You train for it. You practice your cuts. You sharpen your knives like they're sacred tools, because they are. A dull blade means suffering. A good butcher ends it fast. You pride yourself on that. Not the volume you process, not the money, just the speed. There's a reason they pay more for a clean kill. Your apprentice doesn't get it yet. He shakes when he holds the knife. His cuts are too slow. He hesitates. You told him once the animal's already lost its life. Your job is to make sure it doesn't lose anything more than that. Dignity, pain, time, that's what you control. You can't explain it fully. It's not about cruelty. It's about duty. You don't enjoy this. Anyone who enjoys it shouldn't be trusted with a blade. You do it because someone has to, because people eat meat, because death is part of that bargain. But the animals don't care about philosophy. They know what a yard full of blood smells like. They know what happened to their friend who came in and didn't come out. They know the noise the blade makes. They know, and you live with that. You carry it on your skin, in your hands, in the way your boots squelch when you step in the corner where the drain always clogs. In the way your tools shine, not from polish, but from repetition. In the way your own dog watches you differently after you work a long day, like he knows too. There's a heaviness to that knowledge. You don't talk about it. Not to customers, not to neighbors, not even to your wife. You just carry it, quiet. You try to balance it with care, with precision. You try to honor the animal. Even if no one else sees it, you do. A good cut, a clean bleed, a quiet end. That's the closest thing to kindness this job allows. You bury the waste. You salt what you can. You clean the yard. You wait for the next animal. And when it comes, eyes too wide, breath too fast, you whisper, even if they don't understand. I know, if meat is survival, sausage is desperation with a marketing plan. There's no part of the animal too questionable, too ragged, or too weird to end up inside a sausage. You'd be amazed what people will eat once it's ground up, salted, and shoved into a skin-tight tube. Actually, you wouldn't. You're the one who makes them. Sausages are your way of cleaning up the mess, literally. All the bits that don't look good on a hook. The offcuts, the scrapings, the leftover fat, the tendons too small to separate and too chewy to roast. You pile it all up, grind it with salt, sometimes with herbs if you're feeling fancy, and squeeze it through a sheep's intestine until it looks presentable. And people love them. They don't ask questions. They don't look too closely. They say things like savory and rustic and just like my mother made, as if your day hasn't been 3 hours of skinning, trimming, and jamming panic into a tube. Because sausage making, it's not elegant. It's not artisanal. It's an act of controlled chaos held together with string and sheer willpower. First comes the casing. Its intestine, cleaned and soaked and scraped until it's translucent and slippery like wet parchment. You keep it coiled in brine, in a barrel that smells like someone's regrets. The first time you handled it, you gagged. Now, it's just another Tuesday. You pull the casing out gently, lay it flat on the table, and begin the fill. Too much pressure, and it bursts. Too little, and the sausage comes out limp, flabby, misshapen. You've learned to feel it, that fine balance between packed and overstuffed. There's a rhythm to it. Squeeze, fill, twist. Squeeze, fill, twist. You do it for hours. Sometimes the mixture clogs. Sometimes the skin tears. Sometimes, for reasons you can't explain, it just leaks. You've had days where your arms were elbow deep in what looked like someone pureed a barnyard and dared you to make it edible. And you did. Because that's the job. Sausages don't get respect. They're the cheap option, the street food, the afterthought. But you know what goes into them. And sometimes, when the cuts are right, when the fat is perfect, when the skin holds, they're the best thing you sell. A little meat, a little salt, a little time. That's all it takes to turn a mess into a meal. People ask what's in them. You lie. Not always, but enough. You say pork or beef or game, if you're lucky. You don't say last week's shoulder scraps or leftover kidney trimmings or whatever didn't turn gray overnight. You smile, you nod, and you hand them 2 links wrapped in cloth. Every town has its own style. In the north, they like blood sausage, thick, dark, heavy. You mix pig's blood with oats or barley, spoon it into the casing, and boil it until it barely jiggles. The smell is not kind, but the taste is rich, and it keeps you full. In the south, they prefer spice, garlic, sage, crushed fennel seed if they can afford it. You make them too. Same base, better cover. You've made sausages with liver, with brain, with parts of animals you don't even want to name. And the people eat it up, because sausage is trust. Once it's sealed, no one asks. And as long as it doesn't kill them, they come back. That's the part that weighs on you. Because you've had a few close calls. Once, you packed too fast, didn't salt the meat enough. By the next morning, the batch smelled like wet rags and sick. You buried it. Another time, a casing burst during boiling and sprayed a customer's face. He laughed. You didn't. You clean everything twice. You boil your tools. You test the heat of the pot with your bare hand because you've done it so often, you know what almost right feels like. You pray the fat won't turn. You whisper at the brine to hold. You talk to the links like they're little beasts you're training. And in a way, they are. They hang in your stall like trophies, loops and coils of what once was panic and now is profit. You arrange them neatly. You nod when someone points. You wrap them and watch the customer walk off chewing. And you think, there goes a miracle of meat and lies. You've taught your apprentice the basics. He thinks it's gross. He asks, how do people eat this? And you just shake your head, because that's the wrong question. The right question is, how do people survive without it? In winter, sausage is warmth. It lasts longer than fresh cuts. It cooks faster than roasts. It fills the belly when bread runs out. It travels. It stores. It saves. It's not luxury. It's lifeline. You've eaten your own links more times than you can count. Not because they're your favorite, but because they're there. When nothing else is left, the sausages are hard, dry, shriveled, but edible. And when you chew, you know exactly what you're chewing. Sometimes, when you're feeling particularly grim, you name the links, not for customers, just for yourself. Backbone Billy, Fatty May, Mystery Marvin. Your apprentice thinks you're joking. You're not really. Because sausage, more than any other part of your work, carries the full weight of the butcher's life. It's waste turned into need, horror wrapped in hope. Every link a little compromise, every coil a quiet nod to the truth. People don't want to know what they're eating, and you're the one who makes sure they never have to. Blood is everywhere. That's not poetry. That's not metaphor. That's not some grim line meant to make a monk flinch and write a hymn. It's just the truth. If you're a butcher, you live in it. You breathe it. You work it into the folds of your apron like it's dye. And if you're smart, you treat it with respect, because blood doesn't behave. It doesn't listen. It doesn't go quietly. There's a lie people like to tell themselves, that when an animal dies, it just stops, that it lies down, blinks once, and that's the end. They don't picture the shaking, the spasms, the way the blood shoots out in spurts, not flows. They don't think about how long it takes for a body to fully bleed out. You do, because you're the one holding the blade. You try to get it right, fast, clean, efficient. Slice the right vein, angle the body, catch the blood before it hits the ground. If you mess up, it clots, congeals, gels up into something between jam and jelly, but without the sweetness. You've seen it clump midair. You've seen it stick to your boots like honey turned mean. You've slipped in it. Everyone has. No one forgets. And then there's the smell. Fresh blood is sharp, metallic, not like iron, but like fear and rust mixed with sweat. It's not just the blood, it's everything in it. Hormones, heat, that weird clinging warmth that makes you want to wash your hands twice and still not touch your face. You've watched apprentices nearly vomit just from breathing wrong near the drain. But the real trick isn't just handling blood, it's keeping it. Because blood's valuable. You use it. You sell it. It's not waste. It's food. People make puddings, soups, black bread. It binds flour into something filling. You stir it into sausage for body. Some drink it straight. For health, they say. You don't ask questions. So you catch it. Big ceramic bowls, wooden troughs. You position the animal just right. You aim the neck. You hold the legs. One slip and the bowl topples. You've lost meals that way, and a whole day's profit. Nothing ruins a good kill like a bad spill. You've developed a rhythm. You can bleed a sheep in under a minute. A pig takes longer. They fight more. You learn to brace with your knee, to tighten your grip, to know the exact sound a jugular makes when it parts under a blade that's just been honed. It's not a slash, it's a whisper, a soft, wet shudder, and then it pours. Blood's thicker than water. Thicker than most people expect. It doesn't trickle, it pulses, like it's still trying to stay alive, even when the body's giving up. You've seen it hit the bowl so hard it splashes your face. You've seen it stain the stone 3 feet away. You've wiped it off your lips without flinching. Because if you flinch, you fail. You stir it to stop the clots. Big stick, circular motion. Like porridge, but darker. The bowl grows heavier as it cools. You keep it moving. You glance around to make sure the apprentice isn't gagging behind a barrel again. Last time, he dropped the whole batch. You made him mop it up with his own tunic. He hasn't dropped anything since. In summer, blood turns fast. The smell thickens. You cover the bowls with cloth, but the flies still find it. They land in it, lay in it, drown in it. You skim the surface, pick out the bugs. You've watched a customer eat blood pudding that had more wing fragments than flour. They didn't notice. You didn't say a word. Winter's better, slower spoilage, thicker texture, but it clots faster too. You have to move quick, stir hard, keep it warm, or it turns into a red sponge. Once it clots, it's done. Can't cook with it, can't sell it. It goes to the dogs, who lap it up like soup and look at you like you're a god. You're not. You're just the one who watches the blood. You've seen things. Arteries that didn't close, bowls that tipped over full. One time, a cow panicked so hard it thrashed and kicked the blood into the air. It landed on your face, your hands, your boots. You went home that night and didn't talk, just sat by the fire and stared at your palms until the red looked normal again. Blood doesn't wash out easy. The smell gets into your skin, your clothes, your bed, your dreams. You've woken up once thinking your hands were still wet. They weren't. But the memory stayed. People ask if it bothers you. You tell them no, that you're used to it, that it's just part of the work, that it's no different than washing a pan or carrying water. You lie. It always bothers you, not because it's wrong, because it's final. Blood is the last thing a body gives. It's the farewell. You don't say prayers, not out loud, but sometimes you murmur something when the bowl is full, not for the animal, for you. to remind yourself that what you do has weight. Some butchers waste it, let it drain into the dirt. You don't. You save every drop, because you've seen hunger. You've seen people fight over a blood sausage like it was silver. You've seen children with ribs showing, slurping blood broth like it was a feast. You don't throw that away. And yet, every time you pour blood from the bowl to the pot, from the pot to the pan, you feel it, the silence, the echo of what used to be. Because blood doesn't go quietly, not from the body, not from your hands, not from your life. Being a butcher means feeding a town that acts like you're the problem. They want your meat. They need your meat. But they sure don't want to look at you while they buy it. And if they could, they'd probably prefer the whole thing just appeared in their pot by magic. No knives, no stalls, no blood, just dinner, neatly wrapped in denial. But there's no magic here. Just you, your stall, and a line of people pretending not to gag. It starts early. Before the sun hits the awnings, you're already setting up. Meat hauled in, hooks tightened, buckets of salt ready. And as you hang the cuts, ribs, flanks, trotters, tails, the first customers wander up like cats near a fire. They sniff, they squint, they talk to each other just loud enough that you're supposed to hear but not respond. That doesn't look fresh. Is that goat or pig? Can't tell. Last time he sold me something, I was in the privy for a day and a half. Never mind that it was probably the water, or their own cooking fire burning too low, or the fact that they left it out in the heat because their husband was too drunk to help with anything. Doesn't matter. You're the butcher. You're the villain. You're also their supplier, so they buy anyway. But not without the dance. The inspection. The tugging on the fat. The sniffing. You've seen people shove their nose so close to a ham, you thought they might bite it just to prove a point. They don't trust you, and they want you to know it. Every purchase is a miniature trial, and you're always guilty until proven edible. You try to be polite. You answer their questions. You cut their meat the way they like. Thick for stew, thin for pan fry, bone in if they've got a soup to stretch, but it doesn't help. The respect never comes. You're the man with the blade, the smell, the blood under his nails. Not a tradesman, not a craftsman, just the butcher. And then there's the haggling. They haggle like they're trying to win a war. Not just poor folk, everyone. The mayor's wife once tried to shave 4 pence off a lamb shank by claiming it was overly rustic, whatever that means. One farmer brought you his sickliest chicken and asked for a full pig leg in trade. You laughed. He didn't. Some won't even haggle. They just insult. Don't know how you sleep at night. This meat smells like your conscience. I heard you keep the good stuff for the tavern master. And of course, God sees what you do. You hear that one a lot. As if God doesn't have bigger problems than watching you carve up a goat shoulder. As if feeding an entire village is somehow wicked because it's messy. As if the woman quoting scripture didn't buy off from you last week and feed it to her kids. They want the meat, but they want it without guilt, and they use you like a shield for their conscience. The worst are the ones who pretend they're better than you, but still show up early for first pick. They cover their faces with cloth, say they're just passing through, ask you to wrap it so tightly you wonder if they're buying food or smuggling secrets. You wrap it. You say nothing. You know they'll be back. And don't think the rich treat you any better. Nobles don't buy from you directly, of course. They send servants. But those servants, just as bad, snobbier somehow. They walk like they're too clean to stand near your stall. They bring exact coin, demand exact weight, and flinch if their sleeve so much as brushes your table. One told you the smell would haunt him. Another accused you of cheating the scale. You wanted to say, tell your master that meat doesn't weigh less because his kitchen doesn't like looking at bones. But you didn't. You need the coin, even if it comes with a sneer. Some of your best customers are the ones with the least to spend. Widow Glynis, who buys neck bones and makes broth for the whole alley, Old Tom will scrape together pennies for a sausage and offer you half. They never complain. They never flinch. They just say thanks and walk away. You wish you had more of them. You don't. And then there are the children. They don't hate you. Yet. They watch you work with big eyes and open mouths. They ask questions their parents won't. Is that the pig's real ear? Why is the fat white? Do animals go to heaven even if you cut them up? You answer honestly, as best you can, and eventually their parents drag them away. But you remember being a boy like that. Before the stall, before the knives, before you knew how much it took to feed a town that doesn't care who slices the meat, just that it's on time. Once a girl came back to the stall a week after her father bought bacon. She told you it was the best food they'd had in months. She smiled. You gave her a marrow bone, free. Her mother never said thank you, just looked at you like she hoped your apron would fall off into the dirt and take you with it. Because you're not allowed to be human. You're the butcher. They talk about you like you're part of the stall, like you were born next to the cleaver, raised on salt, and emerged from a bucket of brine with your name already cursed. You're a function, not a person, a thing that turns animal into food, and then disappears before supper. But you don't disappear. You go home, you scrub your hands, you try to eat, and sometimes, not often, but sometimes, you taste what you sell and remember it's good, not just edible. Good. And you remind yourself, they don't have to like you, they just have to eat. Because hate doesn't change the hunger. And when the feast bell rings and their tables are full, no one asks where the food came from. They ask for seconds. You'd think the blade is your biggest expense, or maybe the stall, or the wood for the tables, or the rent you pay to the guild to keep your space on market days. But no, it's the salt. Salt is what saves you, and salt is what bleeds you dry. It starts out simple. You need to keep meat from rotting. That's it. That's the whole problem. Because fresh meat, even when it's cold, even when it's clean, turns fast. A good cut of pork will smell sweet at dawn, and like death by dusk if you don't treat it, especially in summer, especially when the flies come early. So you salt everything, liberally, without mercy, and you do it constantly. Salt is the one thing standing between your entire inventory and a pile of spoiled filth crawling with worms. You'd think people would understand that they'd thank you for using it, but no. They complain. It's too salty. It's dry. My stew tasted like the sea. They don't see the barrels in the back of your stall, the cloth sacks dragged in on carts, paid for with half your week's profits. They don't see the numbers you scratch into slate every month, adding up coin by coin the amount you're bleeding out just to make sure their food doesn't poison them. You buy from the salt merchant, who comes in from the coast or the mines. You never like him. He's too clean, too smug. He always smiles like he knows you can't say no, because you can't. He names a price, and you pay it, or you walk away knowing your meat will rot and your customers will vanish, so you pay. It adds up fast. By the time you've salted a carcass, rubbed it down, packed it in layers, filled the gaps, covered the top, you've spent more preserving it than you did buying it. And that's just one. You do this for dozens, weekly, and still, some of it turns. Not everything takes the salt right. Sometimes it's a bad cut. Sometimes the fat blocks the grain. Sometimes you miss a pocket, one little space where the brine didn't reach, and now the whole slab is sour. You've lost entire weeks like that. Open the barrel, expecting dinner, and get a face full of ruin. So you buy more salt. You store it in sealed pots. You cover it with cloth. You use it sparingly where you can, but there's no room for stinginess when decay's working faster than you are. Some butchers try to cheat it, add ashes, or lime, or stretch the brine too thin. You've seen what happens. A row of sausages turn gray overnight. A ham goes green in the center. Customers gag. The priest gives a sermon. Suddenly no one's buying pork. so you don't cheat. You just keep paying. Every month, the salt man returns. His bags look heavier, his horse better fed. You hand him coin, and he hands you your survival. He doesn't care that you're barely breaking even. He doesn't care that your apron's stained in a way no soap can fix. He's clean, he's dry, and he doesn't touch anything that used to be alive. You think about that sometimes, that he deals in preservation, but never touches death. You deal in death and can barely afford to preserve what's left. In winter, it gets a little easier. The cold helps. You can hang the meat longer, let the air do half the work, but even then, salt is insurance. The fire might go out, a warm wind might rise, and if it does, you better hope the salted joints are ready, or everything spoils in a night. In summer, it's a war. You salt every surface. You sweep it under tables. You even rub it into the stall walls. It eats through wood, dries your hands until they crack, and leaves everything you touch tasting like tears. But it works. Mostly, you've tried other tricks. Vinegar, smoke, ash. They help, a bit, but nothing beats salt. Salt is what makes meat travel. You can send a joint downriver, and it'll still be safe when it reaches the next town. You can sell slabs to the tavern and know it'll last through the feast. You can feed soldiers, travelers, monks, all because you packed enough salt into their dinner to mummify a bishop. And no one thanks you. They taste the meat, wrinkle their noses, and say, "Too much salt." You want to scream. You want to drag them to the back, show them the spoilage, the maggots, the ruin. You want to ask them how much food they've kept alive through a heat wave, how many mouths they've fed when every natural law was against them. But you don't. You just nod. Offer them a different cut. Wrap it with care. Watch them walk off, purse their lips, and mutter to their neighbor that he oversalts everything. Your apprentice once asked why you don't just charge more. You laughed, not because it was funny, but because the boy still believes in logic. People don't pay more for salt. They expect it, demand it, but they don't respect it, or the cost. If you raise your prices, they go to another stall. Even if that butcher's worse, even if the meat's half rotten, even if it makes them sick, at least he charges less. So you keep your prices low, and your salt bill high. And every time you break a coin into the merchant's palm, you wonder how many meals you just traded for a handful of white dust. There are nights you sit alone and run the numbers. How much you spent, how much you made, how many hours you worked to end up a few pence ahead. You think maybe you should sell salt instead. Stand in a clean tunic, weighing crystals and nodding like it's a holy substance. But you know you won't. Because salt may bleed you, but without it, everything dies faster. And if that's not the butcher's truth, nothing is. You don't walk into market. You enter it like a soldier walks into a siege, half awake, already bracing. It starts before dawn, dragging your cart over cobblestones slick with last night's rain and yesterday's trash. The wheels creak, the pigs you've slaughtered reek, and the whole place already smells like overripe produce and warmed up fish guts. Everyone's there early. The bakers shouting about their crust. The fishmongers thumping dead eels on wood to show how fresh they still are. The tanners stinking like boiled sin. Butchers, though, you're the spectacle. The one with hooks instead of baskets, tables stained red, knives that reflect just enough sunrise to make people nervous. You don't get a spot. You fight for it. You stake your table like you're claiming a scrap of land in some divine meat-based crusade. Someone's always trying to nudge their stall closer, to snag your foot traffic. You glare, they glare. Welcome to diplomacy by elbow. Noise is constant. It's not just shouting. It's a whole culture of vocal warfare. You don't advertise. You bellow. You praise your own product while casually insulting your rivals. Sweet pork not like Gerald's chewy scraps. Our cuts don't bite back. Customers pretend they don't love it, but they do. They slow their walk just enough to hear you verbally jab your competitors. And sometimes it gets physical. You've seen a cheese seller smack a baker with a baguette. One time, a poulterer chased a boy with a goose still half alive. You haven't brawled in a while, but your apprentice has. He's fast with a cleaver and faster with a comeback. He called someone's lamb mutton in disguise and nearly got his nose rearranged by a stool. You made him clean the whole stall that day, partly as punishment, partly because you didn't want him getting too proud of that joke. Butchers get the worst reputation. Everyone else handles food in nice, neat shapes. You're the one who brings visible death to the table. Meat with bone, meat with skin, meat that used to be an animal yesterday. People want food, but they don't want reminders, and yet they all crowd your stall. Not just for quality, for safety. They know you handle your blades like you mean it. They trust your cuts to be honest. And in a market full of rotten cheese, bruised apples, and watered wine, honesty is more valuable than charm. You don't smile much. You don't need to. Your knives do the talking. But when someone comes back and asks for the same cut they bought last week, that's the closest thing to love you're going to get in this job. Then there's theft. Every hour someone tries it. A hand darting too fast. A child with a clever pocket. A man pretending to inspect a sausage while his other hand tugs a ham off the hook. You've lost entire links this way, but you've also caught some. Once you threw a marrow bone so hard at a thief's back that he dropped everything and ran. Another time, a customer pointed out a cut purse mid-theft. You gave them a half-pound of trimmings for free. Not out of kindness, out of tactics. Market justice runs on reputation. Let them know you're no fool. And suddenly your stall gets a little more respect. You keep your cleaver in sight, always, not to use it, just to remind people what you could do if pressed. Weather turns the market into a war zone. Rain floods the gutters, and meat stalls turn into cold, wet hellscapes. You slip. You drag sodden cloth over your cuts. You try to smile while your hands go numb. Summers know better. Heat brings flies, clouds of them. You swat constantly. You burn herbs. You cover everything in salted cloth. Still they come. Customers complain. You say nothing. It's not like they're going to slaughter their own pig. They need you, even if they act like you're selling sins wrapped in string. You stay. You sell. Because if you pack up, you lose your spot. And in this market, once you lose space, you may as well move to another town. At the end of the day, the square's a battlefield. Trampled bread, melted fat, a smear of something you hope was beet juice. You pack your leftovers, count your coins, and wipe the blood off your boots with a rag that used to be white in another life. You nod to the others, even the rivals, because the market might be war, but it's also survival. And tomorrow, you'll all be back. Same stalls, same insults, same desperation behind every sale. You walk home sore, tired, and half-deaf, but you've sold your cuts, you've fed the town, and your knives are still sharp. So yes, the market is chaos. It's noise, sweat, stink, theft, weather, and insults. It's also where you prove, day after day, that your work matters, that your meat feeds more than hunger. It feeds reputation, trust, and the idea that maybe, just maybe, today won't be the day your stall is empty. You may not be loved, but you are needed, and in a medieval market, that's enough. The meat gets all the glory. The blood gets all the fear. But the bones, they're the quiet leftovers. The part no one talks about, but everyone needs. And if you're a butcher, you know one thing for certain. Bones never go away. They pile up. They linger. They remind you that even after the meat is gone, the animal still takes up space. When you start out, you think bones are trash. You toss them aside, stack them near the stall, maybe throw a few to dogs. But it doesn't take long to realize that bones are value. Just not the kind people want to see. They're too real, too final. A rib cage doesn't lie. A skull can't be disguised. So you get clever. You break them, hide them, repurpose them. You become part craftsman, part scavenger, part janitor of your own leftovers. Some bones get boiled. The marrow sells. Not well, but enough. Rich in fat, thick in flavor. You've watched poor families nurse a soup made from one single beef bone, like it was gold on a string. Others grind the bones into powder, not for eating, but for tools, for polish, sometimes even medicine. One barber swore by pig bone dust as a remedy for rashes. You don't ask questions, you just sell him the bones and take the coin. And then there are the ones that just sit there. The big ones. Cow femurs, pig skulls, ox shoulder blades. Too big to throw, too heavy to carry far. You stack them behind your stall. You try not to trip over them. You try not to think about the fact that they used to move, that this was the part that bore weight, bent at the joints, turned a creature from stillness into muscle. Now it's quiet, hollow. Sometimes the marrow leaks out slow, thick, dark. Other times it's dry, white, flaking like old plaster. You wrap your apron tighter and keep working. The dogs love the bones. They hover, they wait. You toss the scraps you can spare, and they fight over them like gamblers. You've learned which dogs are bold, which ones sneak in and snatch ribs when you're distracted. You don't blame them. Hunger's a truth they understand even better than your customers. At least dogs don't lie about wanting meat or bones. Kids ask for skulls sometimes. Don't ask why. Some use them for games, some carve them, some just want to scare the neighbors. You don't mind. Better that than letting them rot behind your stall until the smell turns. You scrape off what you can, hose them with water, and hand them over like they're odd-shaped toys. One boy painted a sheep's skull with red dye and claimed it talked to him in dreams. His mother stopped buying from you. Your loss? Maybe, but you kept the coin from the skull. And sometimes, yes, you bury them. Not often, but enough. Behind your house, near the woods, wherever the ground is soft, because some bones just feel too close, too human. A pig's jaw looks like a man's if you squint wrong. A rib cage can remind you of someone who once sat across from you at table. On those days, you dig, quietly, late. You don't mark the spot. You just walk back to your bed and hope the dreams stay small. So what happens to the bones? They wait. They feed dogs. They boil into broth. They stack behind stalls. They slip into carts and sacks and back alleys. They tell you what used to be. They outlast the smell, the fat, the meat, the memory. They are the butcher's inheritance. Unpaid, unwanted, unavoidable. You weren't a priest. You weren't a knight. You weren't a scholar. You didn't write the laws, preach the sermons, or carry the banner into battle. But you fed them all. And somehow, that still wasn't enough to make people respect you. You were the hand that turned life into meat, the knife between survival and starvation. And still, they called you dirty. They called you cruel. They called you dangerous. As if the work could be done cleanly. As if the world could go on without you. They feared your tools, envied your skill, and acted like you didn't belong in polite company. But they came back, every day, for stew meat, for sausages, for marrow bones and salted strips. They lined up at your stall with the same faces, tired, hungry, pretending they had nothing in common with the man who broke down carcasses before breakfast. And you sold to them anyway, because it wasn't about pride, it was about feeding people. They didn't have to like you, they had to eat. You did the job. You scraped, sliced, salted, packed, and sold. You watched their children grow on meat you'd carved. You buried the bones behind the stall. You outlived more than one mayor. And yet, when they wrote it all down, the histories, the saints' lives, the court records, your name didn't make it in. Not the names of your fellow butchers, not the men who lifted entire carcasses onto tables by hand, not the ones who stood ankle-deep in blood during feast days so the nobility could eat roast goose and brag about Providence. You're not a hero in the stories. You're not even a villain. You're a shadow, a smell, a necessary evil that everyone forgets the moment their plate is full. You learn to accept that. Mostly. Some days it's harder than others. Your tools last longer than your reputation. That cleaver you sharpened every week, still hanging on the hook. That block table, still stained, still standing. Some apprentice is probably using it now, cursing the flies, counting the bones, watching the stew meat run out too early. And the customers, still grumbling, still coming back. Because no matter how many centuries pass, people still don't want to do what you did. They still want the meat without the mess, the nourishment without the work, the butcher's service without the butcher's presence. You weren't a mystic. You weren't noble. But your hands knew things, things no parchment could hold. You knew how to feel for a tendon before the blade hit wrong. You knew how to split a rib cage without cracking the spine. You knew which cuts the tavern master preferred, which bones the old widow liked for her broth. You knew how much salt a good sausage needed before the flies found it. That's not something you teach. That's not something they put in a guild charter. That's the part you carry, the weight you bear, quiet, heavy, and entirely yours. The world has new butchers now. They wear clean clothes. They work indoors. Their knives are different. Their customers more polite. But the core, still the same. Something dies. Something gets divided. Something feeds the town. And someone walks home sore, splattered, and slightly less human than they were at sunrise. That's the truth you learned. That the closer you are to death, the less room people give you at the table. But you stayed close anyway, because someone had to. You don't get a statue. You don't get a song. You get a hook on a wall, a block worn smooth, and the quiet knowledge that every full belly owes something to a hand like yours. That's the last cut, not a slice, not a wound, just the clean final separation between what lives in memory and what gets forgotten. You already know which side of that you fall on, but if someone's listening, really listening, maybe, just maybe, they'll remember what it cost to keep them fed.